Greetings from Costa Rica. I hope you're doing well. This is Matt Rosensteel with Coldwell Banker Pacific Realty. As always, broadcasting live here from Playa Junquial, Guanacaste for our Wednesday night live Costa Rica chat with Costa Rica Matt. It's my sincere pleasure tonight to welcome a guest to the show. We're going to feature Evelyn López, who is an attorney with P&D Lawyers in Tamarindo. Evelyn, thanks very much for joining me.
Hey, Matt. Very pleased to be here. Thanks for asking me.
For many of my clients, this will be an exciting broadcast because you'll be able to put a face with the name finally. Evelyn helps tons of my clients buying and selling real estate here. She's absolutely one of the top attorneys in the area, one of the most responsive service providers I'm able to work with. And more than anything, she's part of that team that we're able to bring to the table to ensure that clients' interests are well protected. So I appreciate a lot more than you just joining me for this broadcast tonight. I appreciate you helping my clients in so many ways, Evelyn.
Very glad to help you, Matt. You're a great guy to work with as well. So thank you very much.
Excellent. And she understands exactly what I'm fishing for. So tonight, we're going to be talking about some of the legal questions that clients frequently bring up in the process of purchasing real estate here in Costa Rica. First, we're going to go over some of the aspects of Costa Rica corporations that most often I'm asked about and really try and get some higher level information about corporations. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about bringing funds into Costa Rica in order to purchase real estate and working with escrow services. And finally, we're going to go over due diligence and ask Evelyn for some of the common pitfalls that she finds. We'll be asking about the registries and databases that she searches in order to really complete a due diligence report for our clients. And we're going to get some spectacular information, as always, for free here on the Costa Rica Matt channel. Thank you very much for joining us. If you have questions, be sure to post them in the comments because we will be returning to them at the end of every month. Again, Evelyn, thanks very much for joining me, and everybody, stay tuned. Thank you for joining us, Evelyn. Would you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay. Originally from San Jose, worked there a few years, and I moved to Guanacaste, specifically Tamarindo, almost 3 years ago. So I'm quite familiar with the area. I do only real estate and corporate law at the moment. So it's my specialty now. I do advice for acquisitions here, to sell property, to exchange property sometimes. So yeah, go ahead and with your questions.
Just out of curiosity, how many, transactions is your office handling per month lately? Do you have any clue, or is it just a huge number?
Monthly, I'm not sure right now. We have more than 20 in this month. It's June now. So I would say from 20 to 25 a month.
And real estate closings specifically.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes, correct.
Okay, well, they're doing, P&D is one of Tamarindo's longest established offices. It stands for Property and Development Lawyers. And the fact that they've been in Tamarindo now with an office for 2 or 3 decades, I'm not sure exactly when it was founded, is a testament to the good work that they do, the ethical way that they treat their customers, and the fact that they really do have people's best interests at heart. So they're an institution in Tamarindo that you will be working with if you're purchasing real estate through me. They're also handling a lot of varied business for other clients as well, even though I'd love to exclusively employ them. I don't think I could do so. Let's get started talking about Costa Rica corporations, Evelyn. And I remember, 10, 15 years ago, every single property in Costa Rica, or at least especially this part of Guanacaste, was bought and sold with a corporation as the owner. Why was it so popular to use a corporation?
Okay, back in the day, there were few controls from the government. So what attorneys did was just to transfer the shares of the company to another person, and by that transfer the ownership of the title. Okay, so they just sell the shares and appoint new board of directors in there, and by that you automatically become the owner of the property. Okay.
Yep.
That changed over the years because government began to do more controls over companies and over properties. And from the year 2019, we got this new law about corporations, the registry of final beneficiaries. At the beginning, it was only to control the transfer of the shares, but it became like a yearly obligation for all companies. Okay. Also, we have another obligations. Year after year, they became more controlling over people private
using that practice.
Yes, exactly. So it became less and less popular for attorneys to recommend only transfer and acquiring the shares for the company. Okay. Also, when you acquire a corporation, you also inherit their problems. Okay. So we began to change the way we advise clients in these matters, and became more and more popular to transfer only the title for the property and using a new corporation.
Yeah, and to clarify for my viewers, so when in the previous system, they would use the same corporation that would own the property, and rather than transferring the title of that property, you would just transfer the shares of stock. What was the advantage to doing it that way? Why would people inherit the problems of an old corporation in order to acquire real estate?
Okay. First of all, the title only, by transferring only the title of the property to a new corporation, you establish a new owner. Okay, it's a new person that is born, a new entity. So by acquiring the whole corporation, for example, if people were using the same corporation to employ workers for the property, then we have the first problem, because we can face lawsuits from former employees of the property, and of course our clients, for our clients, we don't advise to purchase property
a corporation anymore
because of all of that liability that is inherited.
Yep.
And this clarifies.
Yeah, and previously, when I'm curious, they were transferring shares and they would declare a very low value for those shares in order to save transfer taxes and not pay a big bill to transfer the property. At that time, when they were doing it, was that technically legal, or was it illegal and people were just sort of ignoring the tax obligation by transferring those shares?
It was not illegal per se, but the thing is that they were avoiding paying taxes. So yeah, that's the main issue. With transferring the title, you are facing 1.5% of transfer tax. Back in the day, depending on the purchase price, it was a lot.
Yep.
And yeah, this was the main reason.
And so today, now that the government has more control over this, have many foreigners started to purchase property without a corporation, or do most foreigners still use a corporation to own property here?
Most people still use the companies.
And why is that?
Why? I can speak for most of my clients because they don't live here, and it begins a problem when the owner is not here, because for everything we need to have a power of attorney to, for example, go and change the electric contract number. For the simplest reason you can think, you would need the presence of the client in Costa Rica. Okay, I think from my point of view, this is the main reason.
Mm-hmm.
It's not anymore about saving money in taxes or whatever you used in the past. Now I think it's simpler just to have the company. The attorneys just have the legal books for the companies and can represent you in closing, to sell the property, to get a new electric contract, to get the internet service in the property, whatever you can think of. For example, when they are building the property, and they are in the States or in Canada, they need the architects to go there to the municipality and do process on their behalf. And it's so simple, just to send a POA by email. They just have it signed and witnessed, send it back to us, and we can produce the notarized powers of attorney to be representing them when they are outside of the country. For me, that's the main reason, actually.
Yeah, absolutely.
You have another legal things like liability, like privacy, but in the practice, in the everyday that we do, that's the simpler way to do it when we have a company.
Yeah, absolutely. You see that signed power of attorney for a corporation can be a very simple document that requires that can be done quickly for a specific purpose, and the corporation makes that possible. You mentioned the corporation's books, and this is something that I think is unknown to foreigners, or it's a new concept purchasing here, that your company on paper legally consists of a number of legal books. Would you tell us what those books are and how they're official?
Okay. Basically, we have two types of companies. The SA, that's
Sociedad Anónima, yeah, which would
Sociedad Anónima, which is not
an anonymous
really,
partnership. Yeah,
exactly. Which is not being used anymore, honestly, especially for the types of clients we have right now. If they are a couple of family, small family, we like to recommend limited liability corporations. And with LLCs, we have only two legal books: the registry of shareholders and the assembly of shareholders. The registry of shareholders, it's a book in which we establish who the owners of the company are, who owns the shares for the company. Okay. Yep. And when you buy a company and when you purchase those shares, the transfer of those shares are made by means of a simple minute in that book. Okay.
Okay.
For the other book is the assembly of shareholders. In that book, the decisions for the company are made. Okay. For example, if we want to change the name for the company, if we want to change the legal address for the company, authorize a purchase of a property, authorize the sale of the property, granting powers of attorney, whatever you can think of is done by means of a minute in the assembly of shareholders book. So
Okay.
it's really important to keep the books current and safe, and with your attorney.
I was going to say, yeah, this is one of the biggest obstacles to some real estate sales. People who purchased property 10 or 15 years ago received their books for the corporation, promptly forgot about the documents, they didn't look important or whatever, and they've lost the books over time. It ends up delaying the sale of the property because first you have to legally recreate these physical documents. Now, I've seen most of the corporate books here with handwritten pages. Is it still required to write into these books by hand, or can you add minutes using a computer these days?
Okay, with the new regulations, we have digital books. So we have to print everything down. But for all companies that still are with handwriting books, we still have to do the handwriting minutes. Yeah.
Okay, and so you can either create, is it that the company has been created past a certain date, it can have digital books, or is it created with some sort of distinction in the bylaws of that company that they will allow digital books?
The difference is the date. Yeah.
Okay.
And also, if you have the old books, you can do a small process in the National Registry to get like an authorization number to create the digital books. So you can have actually both.
Well, but even in the circumstance of digital books, you're not talking about having a file on a computer that shows the books. You still have those physical books, just now with pages that have computer printing on them.
Yeah, you can remove the pages and you can include new ones. You can, for example, decide to print everything again.
And these books, they used to have a stamp on every page to sort of authenticate them. Is it still required to have that in every corner of the page, or what makes these books official and not just, you know, something that I picked up off the street and said, oh, here's my corporate minutes?
Okay, it's the authorization number. You're supposed to have the authorization number in every page, and every page needs to have a number.
Okay. Wow. And that authorization number appearing on each page, does someone have to go through and fill the blank book with that, or only the pages that have information and the actual minutes from meetings on them?
Well, what we do in the office, we print the whole book you can actually choose the number of pages. So we print a small amount of pages, and if needed, because not every corporation finalizes the book, you know. Yep. So we go, when we finalize all the pages, we go ahead and print new ones, blank.
Okay. Yeah, so in review, for the kind of limited liability corporation that you guys recommend, which is not the SA but the SRL, there are two books, El Libro de Registro de Accionistas and El Libro de Actas de Asamblea. The registry of shareholders and your assembly of shareholders book. Hold on to these books because they are your corporation here in Costa Rica by and large. Are there any other legal documents associated with corporations that foreigners should expect to come when they purchase one and that they should expect to care for?
Well, the good standing certificate for the company. That's a document from the National Registry that says all the basic information about the company, the registered numbers and the registered address, the shares, the number of shares, who the board of directors is, basically.
So you had mentioned earlier one of the filings that has to be done every year. You mentioned the registry of final shareholder or final beneficiaries. This document, I understand it was made. What year did they start requiring it as an annual filing? Was that only a year ago or so?
It was 2019.
Okay. And what date is that due every year?
It's April.
Okay. April 1st, April 30th?
April 30, but okay. All the years that we had the final registry since 2019, the government has delayed the deadline.
Every single year?
Yeah.
This is Costa Rica, folks. And I remember the first year that they passed the obligation, there were like 7 or 8 delays. At first they said, oh, it can be, 2 months later. Oh, it can be 6 months later. And they kept delaying and delaying the deadline, which happens for so many government processes. And the first thing when people start to panic because there's some new administrative requirement, the first thing I tell people is hold off and just wait until this is actually going to happen. And very often things get delayed. Now that registry of final beneficiaries, you're saying who the shareholders are or who benefits from this corporation. Does that mean that what corporations you own is completely open to the public, like you can find the board of directors, or is it still somewhat private information?
It's really private. Only the POA for the company, depends, but only the POA has to know who the shareholders are. Okay. And this is something used basically to control the transfer tax, because if you declare to the government that you are the owner this year and next year you change the ownership of the company, you're caught.
Yeah, caught. Yeah, it's a weird word to pronounce in English and spelled. Yeah. Was the law created with the intent of controlling that transfer tax? I had always figured. Okay.
Yeah,
I sort of figured it was more related to money laundering or something.
Yes, also, but remember what I told you about back in the day, they avoided the transfer tax by only transferring the shares of the company. This is a way to control that. And technically, if you sell the shares of the company and the company owns a property, you still need to pay the 1.5% of transfer tax, even if you sold only the shares. Okay. So that's a way to control that, and also to avoid money laundering.
Yeah.
The declarations that you may make online to the government are only accessible by the central bank, and other government institutions don't have access to the information. At least this is like the official information we have.
Yeah, one hopes that only the central bank has access to this information. Now, if a foreign government comes looking for, a U.S. citizen's holdings in Costa Rica, is the central bank, are they cooperating and providing that final beneficiary information if, let's say, the, U.S. tax authorities come with a, warrant for more information? or is it pretty much sealed and only internal information for Costa Rica?
Honestly, I am not 100% sure about it,
Okay.
but my opinion is that we have international treaties with the states that obligates the government to provide that information. So I said that yes, they
Totally.
are obligated to.
Yeah, absolutely.
For example, the Tratado de Libre Comercio,
Yep.
I think
NAFTA.
yeah, exactly. By the obligations that the government acquired with the US government, yes, they have to provide that information.
Yep, absolutely. I did speak a little bit about CAFTA in last week's episode on June 8th. It was very much.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a big topic.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it was, and I glossed over it. I barely touched on it, but I, remember, one of my friends who's been here for, 30 years saying that CAFTA was probably the greatest moment of sort of like societal tension that he had seen in his time here, because people were very passionate. Lots of people in Costa Rica did not want the government to sign it. I mean, there were months of, all kinds of debates and protests, and definitely it wasn't a clear-cut, one-sided issue where the whole country wanted to agree. I think the final vote was pretty close together, and the people against and for it in the referendum that they did. But definitely, the U.S. and Costa Rica now, as bound by that treaty, Costa Rica is going to provide information about U.S. citizens and what companies they own down here. So that's great information on corporations. One of the other difficulties that we've been dealing with in a lot of clients is now the process of bringing funds down to Costa Rica to purchase real estate. And first of all, I'd ask you, how do you recommend that people purchasing real estate here get the money into the country?
By an escrow company.
Absolutely. And that's the same recommendation I make. And I'll ask Evelyn, why, aside from the security of escrow and having that money in a third party, what sorts of benefits do escrow providers give to people purchasing here in Costa Rica?
Okay. Well, first of all, the safety of the transaction. The second is if the money or the seller's bank account is in Costa Rica, the escrow company requires from the buyers all the documents supporting the origin of the money. Because right now we are in a big active market, in real estate. Well, obviously, but the government laws, the money laundering laws are a big thing right now, and all the banks have to comply with that. And at the moment, when funds higher than $10,000 are in a Costa Rican account, they are requiring everything. They are requiring origin of the money, know your client's forms, bank statements if you claim that those funds came from savings, for example, bank reference letters. We have a lot of documents and a lot of obligations to provide. And when you transfer this responsibility to a third party, I think it reduces the stress for the parties. I don't know. Yeah. So that's the main reason.
Yeah. So essentially, the escrow service does the due diligence on the money that a Costa Rican bank is obligated to do in order to get them into the country, thus making really that first step, the due diligence on the money, is complete, the funds can come down and they're not questioned, they're not frozen, they're not held up.
Mm-hmm.
What sort of, I know that I've had some clients now who have been submitting bank statements month after month to update escrow as to where the balance of their purchase price is sitting. It's very onerous, and a lot of people don't respond positively to this level of oversight. Why in the heck, Costa Rica is a very foreign investment friendly place. Where has this all come from? Why are they this strict? And, how has this evolved over time? How did we get here today?
Okay. I think Costa Rica went from zero control to way too much control. That's my opinion. And the market being as active as it is right now, it brings like red flags to all the banks, to all the government institutions. And I don't know, like the historic reasons to the situation we are facing now. But I said that it came from zero controls in the past,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And how long ago was it? 20 years ago that there were zero controls? 10 years ago? How recently was that?
Okay. The new taxes law is from 2019. The registry of final beneficiaries is also from 2019. So I think it's pretty recent.
Yeah.
10 years ago, still no control.
Yeah, absolutely. And so one of the things that, Evelyn and I have run into now is the fact that very much you should use a Costa Rican escrow service, because they're bringing the money down to Costa Rica and getting it into the country along with all of that compliance work. There are escrow providers in the US and Canada that are legally allowed to be related to real estate transactions here. They can do business by managing funds for people. But when your escrow is located in the US and you go to close a transaction, if more than $10,000 of that money is going down to Costa Rica rather than staying up in the US, you might be the subject of that scrutiny, having not produced the due diligence and that compliance work here in Costa Rica. And it's very important to make sure that, when you're lined up to close a transaction, the funds will be dispersed and everybody will get paid without banks then saying, well, you're bringing in an international transfer and we need to red flag this and hold it up. Let's move on. And I wanted to also talk a lot about due diligence, and what you attorneys do to ensure that clients' interests are protected. First of all, could you go through how you all sort of check the title of a property and what things you look for when you're examining just that title?
Okay, sure. For the title, we do like basic things and we go further on other things, okay? We go back through all the change of transfer of the title until the property is born or until we are feeling safe, depending on the transfer of the property, depending on the owner, because being in the area give us like the advantage to know a lot of people here, a lot of attorneys, a lot of real estate agents like you. So we are really familiar with all types of annotations or problems that titles might have. The first thing we check is the measurement in the title and in the survey, okay? We check that the property has access to a public street or to an easement, for example. Why? Because to get the building permit in an empty lot, you need to have access directly to a public street or an easement legally registered. Okay, so that's the main one. And we also check for other liens, like other easements, water easements, view easements. And to check all of that, we have to go online. I mean, this is like a public database, but there are also documents that you have to purchase to get access to. Okay, so we check everything. We check all the liens and review the content of each one of them. We also do the title search until the property was born, or until we feel safe of the current ownership.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember there was one property somebody had been looking at, and I just asked Gabriel, your the firm's founder, I have somebody interested in this, and he could tell immediately by looking at it that it was suspicious activity. It had recently changed hands to the current owner. There were some other red flags just there that suggested it wasn't actually owned by the current owner. It's very interesting to me the way when you guys are looking at those annotations and liens. I want to mention there was one situation recently where we had somebody purchasing a home, and you only had to write back to the seller's attorney, oh, is this annotation just left on there from that previous law? You already knew the lawsuit because you're familiar with the area. Some of these annotations, though, is there always a document associated with it that you can purchase through the registry to look at what exactly it is? Or are there sometimes when you just have to sort of understand what kind of easement it is and make a judgment call without seeing backup evidence?
Yeah, sometimes we are familiar with, for example, an easement, and we are sure only by looking at it that is a past easement, for example. So we don't have, and also sometimes it says the characteristics in the title right there, so you don't have to go and look for the other document online or in the National Registry. But sometimes, like the one you are referring to, that was for a lawsuit, I think. So we have to go to the courthouse and check the files there and get copies of it. So not everything is in the National Registry. Sometimes we have to extend a bit our research.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been looking at titles on properties for a long time. I need a crash course on what means what. Lots of things I can recognize, but sometimes it's tough to tell the difference between an annotation that's actually a big problem and an annotation that is, just an easement that was applied to the mother farm that now applies to the next generation. So if you're looking at property in Costa Rica and you see, the title has this annotation or this gravamen or an hipoteca, which is a lien, many of those things aren't deal killers and reasons you shouldn't purchase the property. Most often, there's something that the attorney is acquainted with. And when you're looking among possible attorneys to help you with due diligence on your property, hopefully your attorney will be able to look at the full title with you and explain each one of those little paragraphs that can appear below the information that's cited, because it can range from simple rainwater easements or view easements where different properties have to respect view corridors or not dump runoff onto a neighboring property. Or it could be a massive lawsuit that means the seller isn't supposed to sell the property without resolving their legal issues first. What would you say are some of the most common pitfalls or the legal problems that properties have that actually would be prevent a sale or be something that clients should decide to walk away for?
Okay. No access to services like water or electricity is one of them. No access to a public street is the second one.
Yep.
Lawsuits, we have to check first which is the status of the lawsuit and if can be, for example, reduced to a payment, or if it's something that cannot be fixed with negotiation. So yeah, every specific case we have to look at it, and depends on the consequences. Yeah, but those are like the not negotiable.
Yeah. Well, and I'm curious, I've seen a property that it turned out that it had
also.
Oh, go ahead.
Also, sorry, the use for the property. For example, if the client wants to do a hotel or a condominium, but actually the use for the land is only a residential 1-unit property, so we cannot fight against that.
Yeah, and that the land use is shown through the municipal estudio de uso de suelo, or are there other documents that tell you what it can be used for?
It's basically the uso de suelo certificate.
Yep. Which for those who don't speak Spanish, the estudio de uso de suelo would be the land use study. People call it the zoning certificate. And my impression is the zoning here outside of areas defined by planes reguladores is pretty open. Are there particular locations where you see more restrictions on the land use and what the permitted possibilities are?
For example, with agricultural properties, we cannot have over 15% of building or any type of structures. There are areas of only commercial, for example, where you cannot build a house.
Okay. And what sorts of areas, where are there designated areas that can only be built for commercial purposes? Can you think of a specific example? Like in downtown Santa Cruz?
Yeah, most of them are mixed.
Yeah, so it would be
not only commercial, but you can mix between commercial and residential.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wanted to ask as well, what, you check the national registry, which is where you can see the title, the liens, and you can do a lot of that research. What other databases do you consult to make sure that a property is truly free and clear and able to be transferred at closing?
Okay. Besides from National Registry, we have to do a small due diligence on the owner company. So we go and check the corporate tax or other taxes obligations for the companies. For example, if the company is active, commercially speaking, if they have delayed taxes filings, that prevents us to register the title on the name of the new company, for example.
Yeah.
If the company is also registered with the Social Security as a company, as an employer, for example, if they have debt with the Social Security, that also prevents us to transfer the title of the property. So that's another thing we check, and the one we discussed earlier, the registry of final beneficiaries also
Yep.
prevents us to transfer the title. So that's the main one.
Okay, so there's the title research that you're doing through the National Registry, and then separately the due diligence on the company. This specifically came up recently on a closing we've been referring to, where Evelyn and Gabrielle had done the due diligence on the company, and you found that there was a debt with the Caja, the Social Security system, in the company's name. And the seller's attorney responded by saying that you shouldn't be looking into the company, really, that it was sort of none of your business. But what you're saying is, if I understand correctly, if they have a debt against them with one of these ministries, the Caja, or they haven't filed their final beneficiaries, then the government could step in and stop the transfer of the title because of that corporation's bad standing. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, correct.
Well, and let's talk about, so when we're at closing and the buyers have signed the escritura de traspaso, the transfer deed, you guys send that into the National Registry so that they can actually execute the transfer and now reflect the new owner. Are they doing anything on their end? When they receive a transfer deed for a property, do they notify relevant institutions, hey, this property is about to be transferred? Or what sort of mechanism would there be for the government to find out that that company was being transferred, or that the title was being transferred, and to pull the brakes on the transaction?
Okay, that's all made by the National Registry. Okay, so they have a list when they receive a transfer deed. They have a list of items that they have to review from the purchasing company and from the selling company. And both companies have to comply with those requirements, and also the transfer deed itself has to comply with other requirements to be approved and finally registered. So once they receive the document, they go online and to other government database, and they review all of this one by one. If we don't have this and that, they get back to us, and basically saying that we cannot register the transfer of the title because you owe this, and this.
Barry, I had no idea that there was another round of checking. I sort of just figured that the National Registry wasn't organized enough to do that. And to me, it was mysterious. So I'm really interested to hear about that. And, this demonstrates that really, if you're buying property in Costa Rica and you want things to be smooth, you don't want to find the friendliest, easygoing attorney who you might meet somewhere. You really want to do your background check on who is going to help you with the purchase and sale of your property. Because to be honest, there are lawyers in Costa Rica, and I'm obviously excluding present company, but I've been surprised to see that there are definitely lawyers here who don't have a full understanding of all of the aspects involved in property transfers. And a lot of times there are attorneys who are super friendly. Their specialty might be divorces or any other kind of law. And because they know a family, they say, oh yeah, I can handle a property transfer for you. But if they're not routinely doing it day in and day out, if they don't have 30 closings a month, or the 20 that P&D is doing every single month, and I'm sure you are doing way more in January through April, those attorneys can miss some very vital simple steps to the process that end up delaying your sale. They can end up really causing one of those stories where you hear people who don't own their property after paying for it, or whose transfers take a much longer time than expected. Frequently, it's just because the attorney didn't have the experience to handle things properly. Evelyn and the folks at P&D Lawyers are part of the reason I feel so confident in guiding my clients towards investments in Costa Rica. I know that it's not just my advice and my, watchfulness helping them out. I have spectacular lawyers behind me who are doing all of this every single time and ensuring that real estate transactions proceed according to plan. I really appreciate all of the information you've given us today, Evelyn. I'm not going to give your contact information out because I know that people would just love to keep asking you more questions. But if you've watched and you do have a question for Evelyn, post it in the comments. In the last Wednesday night Costa Rica chat with Costa Rica Matt of every month, I'll go over those questions, and I'm sure if we have some good ones out there, we can get feedback from Evelyn and perhaps Gabrielle to answer those here in 2 weeks on June 29th, when I'll be doing my monthly roundup. So again, Evelyn, I really appreciate your time, your spectacular insight, and all of the information you've shared. I'm sure my clients do as well, and as well as our enormous international audience here watching the broadcast. If you're watching and you haven't already done so, be sure to click subscribe on my channel and hit that notification button. It will make me feel incrementally more self-important. Once again, from Guanacaste, Costa Rica, this has been your live Costa Rica chat with Costa Rica Matt. Evelyn López from P&D Lawyers. Again, a million thanks, and I'll look forward to seeing you, I think, probably Friday for a closing that we have together, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yes. See you super soon. Thanks.
Thank you.